And we're back. I've got Tom Canton in the building, someone whose opinion I really respect. It's always a great chat. And I must say, we never had a conversation, people, but we're wearing the same jersey. The chemistry's on a million. You say, my guy?
Yeah, good man. How are you?
I'm good, man. You know what? Now that the season's done and the highs and the lows and the everything in between, I feel a bit mellow. I always find myself thinking about what we could have done, what we didn't do, and everything else. But I'm not going to lie, Tom. Fundamentally, I miss Arsenal. I actually miss us. We've not played for 2 minutes, and I miss us already.
Fair. I'm not of that mind. I'm glad it's over, mate. I'm done. I'm so put a fork in me, mate, because I just I'm so finished with this season. It was not an enjoyable campaign in the end. It was a real slog, and we had to deal with so much awfulness and adversity, and then it ended with Tottenham winning a trophy. I mean, you could not write a worse season, really, from an Arsenal perspective. On that side of things. So I'm happy for a break, happy for the summer, happy for transfers to take over and to start looking ahead to turning over a new leaf.
Do you know what, Tom? Yeah, you've probably taken a smile off my face because I completely got
Sorry, man.
amnesia and forgot about the Spurs thing, man. Nah, yeah, you know what? You're right. I'm wrong. You're actually right. I have to ask you this. Yeah, it's a bit of a mundane question, but I get asked it. It's nice to ask someone else. Have Spurs had a better season than us because they won a trophy?
Of course, they lost 22 games. They're going to suck. They're going to look like they could sack their coach still. But of course they didn't. The Europa League is after the changes. Like this is, and this goes, for whoever would have won the competition this year. I would have said the same thing. It comes across as salty because obviously of what happened. But I just think when it comes to looking at the broader picture. The Europa League, since the changes they've made, where they're now no longer Champions League teams drop into that competition, English teams are going to dominate. Seeing English clubs in finals should be an absolute minimum expectation every single year. I was doing a piece the other day looking at Aston Villa and Crystal Palace's squad value against all the current known qualified teams. Even Palace have like £100 million plus of like the next best club. They're like the second highest club value in that competition of the qualified teams for next season. Villa have, I think, double that of the third place in terms of their squad value. So it's just night and day, and that competition after the changes has just become such a really an irrelevance, I think, for clubs like Arsenal, and we shouldn't really be affected by who wins it.
Exactly, man. As you said at the beginning, we've got so much to think about as Arsenal internally before we look at rivals. And I agree with your point about the Europa League. Obviously, down to the changes they made where teams don't even drop down. Yeah, people can be salty because when we was in it, fair enough, we didn't win it. And that could be the best or the worst thing that happens to a club like Spurs because, yeah, it's great for the fans. They get their parade and that's all fans really care about, trophies and living those moments. But the amount of losses, the amount of injuries, the lack of direction as a club. The same would have been said and can be said for Man United had they would have won. Obviously, you're looking over two different lenses. And then then that makes me ask you then about the Champions League because, like yourself, I've got a lot of time for Mikel Arteta, but I did find myself going, "Oh," when he said it was taken out of context, but we got the best team in the Champions League. I hear the rhetoric, but then you look at PSG and they won it. I would have loved to have swapped places. Where were you when? What did you make, better yet, of Mikel Arteta's comments when he said that?
I didn't come out. I was in that press conference. I didn't come out of it feeling great. I kind of at full time against PSG resigned myself to the knowledge that we were just beaten by the better team, and PSG deserved to go through. They took their chances. We didn't. Yes, I think we had moments that were better, and we certainly started the second leg much improved. And had we have taken some of those opportunities that came to us early on, we probably would be talking about a different thing right now. But we didn't. And so you have to hold your hands up, I think. To turn around and say, their goalkeeper was the best player across the two legs. It's like maybe. I don't think he's necessarily wildly incorrect by saying that, but it comes across just incredibly salty. And I don't think it comes across with the right nature and the right level of respect to your opponent. So I've got all the time in the world to talk positively about what Mikel Arteta has done at Arsenal, but I thought that was one of his lower moments after the PSG game in that press conference, and I just felt that he didn't really show his opponents the gratitude, not even respect, but just the appreciation for what they've done to you and your team. I don't think we're the best team in Europe. I think we were one of the best in Europe still because you battered Real Madrid 5-1. That doesn't come out of nowhere. You put 7 past PSV or 9 past them in 2 legs. You are one of the best teams in Europe, but we weren't the best, and PSG are deserved winners of the tournament.
I think you're bang on the money, Tom. And I expect what I'm about to ask you. I expect Arteta to be like this, and I do think with the way Arsenal are and Mikel Arteta is, and just how we are in general, I do think words are taken out of context and they're span all around. And when you look at even me, I fell victim of it. Sometimes I've seen, I guess, the rage and clickbait and thought, "Well, did Arteta really say that?" And then when you look at actually what he said, even down to what was it, the League Cup, where he was speaking about the football, and it was just completely blown into.
Yeah.
So I do think his words are taken out of context a lot.
Sure.
But do you think he's a bit of a sore loser? And I expect him to be for what it's worth.
I think everyone's a sore loser at that level, are they not? Like, Thierry Henry is the player that he is because of how assured he was in his own abilities and how arrogant he was as a player. And, I think that crossed over into his punditry, as we've experienced recently as well. But those characteristics and traits make you, how successful you are. You want to believe you're the best. You want to continue to instill that belief in your own players, because if you show any kind of chink of weakness, that can be something to be exploited. So in a way, it can be a weakness, and you can maybe prey on that and frustrate teams. And Newcastle have been quite good at exploiting Arsenal's kind of that element of Arsenal sometimes. And I think that from an Arteta perspective, I haven't got an issue with him being a bad loser. All I would like to see sometimes is a little bit more accountability, I think, from him when we don't win the games the way we'd want to.
You touched on something then. I completely forgot about it. What did you make of Thierry Henry's comments? Because that seems to have sent Arsenal's social media fan base into a frenzy.
Yeah, I didn't agree with the majority of kind of. I think, to be fair, I say the majority of. I think there were three key themes from kind of it that I really took on board. One was on the trophies and the success and Arsenal over the last 3 to 4 years. And that was the time span he's really talking about the fact that we hadn't won a trophy. We hadn't got to a final. I think that's fair. I think it's fair to be critical of Arsenal in that sense, to say that the fact they haven't reached a final in these years, the investment that's gone into the team, how impressive the team is, how they've played. They've got to record-breaking numbers of goals and wins last season, more than the Invincibles. This season, of course, it didn't work out the way we wanted. So I don't have too much of an issue with that. The comments he made about the Raheem Sterling signing, when he was kind of like, Arteta chose Sterling and instead they didn't buy a striker. Those two things are not connected. Arsenal and Arsenal wanted a striker. Yeah, it wasn't like we signed Sterling instead of a striker. Like that's not what happened. If you want to look at it just like if you had no interest in the context or the information or explanation of the summer, how it went, you'd be like, oh, Arsenal signed Sterling, they didn't sign a striker, that must mean. But this is like school ground stuff. That's just not what happened. And then the other one was when he started talking about the injuries. And he started mentioning things like, are they doing ice baths? And I'm like, Arsenal pile millions of pounds into the most prestigious sports scientists and biomechanical experts, doctors, the technology they use. Are they using ice baths? I was like, what?
You're better than that on Reed, man.
I mean, I think it's one of those, I said it on my morning show today. I think it's one of those when he looks back at what he said, he might look back at it and think, that looks a little silly in retrospect.
I went too far.
And he obviously used the words that were quite pointed. He said, that's on the staff. He went and that's on the staff. And there's already a lot of conspiracy theorists amongst Arsenal supporters around kind of training and all this. Arsenal last season had a really good injury record. Most of our players stayed fit. We've now had one season where, those things have snowballed. I put that personally down to a lack of recruitment, a lack of depth in the squad that exacerbates those issues. And I think he brought up recruitment in his answer as well, which again, I think was fair to bring up. But when you start talking about training camps and ice baths and training specifically, A, he's not there. B, we went on a training camp last season to Dubai, which was hailed as this amazing moment in Arsenal's season that catapulted them to the best second half of a campaign we've seen in recent memory, if at all. And then this summer, obviously this season, we went to Dubai again, same training camp, same place, exactly the same as last time. And obviously Kai Havertz tries to block a shot and does his hamstring in the most innocuous, unfortunate moment. So I think he just went off on. I think he was kind of in that environment of Gary and Jamie there, and it was all being whipped up a bit, and he got a bit carried away and said things that, in reflection, I think are very, very scrutable. So
I don't think you're lying, Tom, at all, man. I think Henry started off well, and then, like you said, with the whole ice bath comments and the Sterling comment, he kind of lost me a bit. It is what it is, man. What do you put this season down to? Obviously, it's a mixture. You can't just say it's only injuries, it's just tactics, it's just recruitment, it's just this, it's just that. It is a mixture of things. But for you, what do you find yourself gravitating towards?
As in, like a core reason for what happened. I think it has to go back to the 2 transfer windows. I think it has to. I can look at individual kind of tactical points of Arteta's season, which not necessarily the right thing. Substitutions in certain games, the way in which we've dropped 22 points, was it, from winning positions? Like, they're things that you have
14 draws.
14 draws. Like, these are things that have to be better. But I do think that everything, when you really boil it all down, comes back to the recruitment from the summer, first of all, and January. I think I underestimated in reflection just how poor the summer window was, because I looked at the start of the window. I was very much like, right, Arsenal in 23-24 were excellent down the right. Saka, Odegaard, White, brilliant. They were so good. We got Timber coming in. We need to make sure our left is really focused on and improving that, because the left back position was not secured. The left 8 was being talked about a lot in that window as well.
Yep.
And Arsenal went out and added those 2 positions. They added a left back in Calafiori, who is a very good player, but obviously missed out on a lot of the season.
Needs to stay fit.
Mikel Merino missed the first 2 months because of an injury to his shoulder in the first training session. Again, not a muscular issue.
So unlucky.
It's just and that kind of set the tone for the season. But the other area that we know that we needed to add in was the attack. We needed depth.
Yep.
We needed quality. We needed a centre forward, really. And it was not a window that was particularly forthcoming when it came to striker availability. We were interested in Šeško. It was a deal that logistically just couldn't be done. He wanted his future sorted out before the Euros. Arsenal still had Eddie Nketiah at that point, which they obviously had to move on. There was a lot of consciousness about UEFA FFP. And while fans don't like hearing those things, I'm just telling you what it is. I'm just saying.
Shoot the messenger, man.
Exactly. I'm just saying what happened. And Arsenal obviously sold Eddie Nketiah on deadline day for a very good fee, £30 million with add-ons included. And it was too late. And I remember speaking to, at the time, our chief writer at Football London, Kai Karnak, about this. And I remember talking to him on deadline day, like, because he's leading, obviously, the coverage for us. And I was saying, I'm trying to get a feeling. And as of like 11 a.m., like, there was no sense anything was happening on deadline day. And I remember talking to him about this idea or not the idea, but what actually happened was just like, there was a phone call on deadline day from Chelsea to Arsenal that just changed everything, because it just meant that Arsenal were just like, this deal is just silly. Like, I don't know why on earth you'd say no. It's effectively like they felt it was silly to say no to this deal to Sterling. Because
it might have been because we'd have had even less players, Tom, man.
That's the thing. It was a case of you can have Sterling for a deal that doesn't affect you financially in any way, or nothing. And you're losing Reece Nelson. And retrospect, it's like, well, nothing's not too far away. So
yeah.
At the time, Sterling's season at Chelsea hadn't been anywhere close to as bad as it was, obviously, this season for Arsenal. He had contributed, and he got something like 16 or something goal contributions throughout the campaign. Like, it was better than not adding, especially with Reece Nelson leaving on loan on that deadline, and Eddie Nketiah leaving, and Emil Smith-Rowe having left already. So it was a bad window, and I put it all back to that. And January then was an utter failure. And obviously Edu left in November, and that then left the January window being led by somebody who's never led a transfer window. He's done some good work, don't get me wrong, and people, I think, will stigmatise Jason Ato around that January window and forget, the fact that he has done a lot of work behind the scenes to build this Arsenal squad with Edu. That doesn't get spoken about. He did a lot of work with the Martin Zubimendi deal as well that he's expected to go through this summer. But it was the right decision not to make him our leading sporting director this summer. And now we have someone in charge who hopefully is going to deliver us a very, very different summer a year later.
I think you're bang on the money, man. I think I overestimated last summer. I really gave it more ratings because of the exits. Like, me, I didn't want Smith-Rowe to go, but I understood it. Eddie Nketiah understood it. Obviously, playing the hindsight game, I know people don't think there's some people that don't think much of Smith-Rowe or Fabio Vieira or Nelson or Nketiah, but maybe we could have held on to a couple of those. Maybe we could have, and this is what I need Berta to do this summer, maybe pivot towards other options, because I do think we've been caught in this trap of that's our target and not going after any others. January was, I don't know how I can be more disappointed in hindsight over the summer, but January, because nothing happened, and it was kind of predictable in the sense that, unfortunately, I think I think as a squad, we just had to run ourselves into the ground. And I think any bit of juice that we had left was probably in hindsight used in the 2 legs against Real Madrid. And it kind of came to an end. And I did kind of think we might get to the Champions League final just because of mainly the game at the Emirates, but it just wasn't to be. So we've got to put our best foot forward. I agree with what you're saying there. I don't think Jason Ito, not that I know him or anything like that, should have been given Berta's role, because I do think we've tried the whole Arteta learning on the job, Edu learning on the job. Let's get an experienced man now, and that's what I'm happy to see. But yeah, it just feels like one where there was probably rumblings off the pitch, if that makes sense. Like especially with Edu going, it's just a shame, man, because kind of what you've been saying and what I've been saying, it's just a case of what if, because there is a reality where we signed a striker, signed a winger, kept everybody fit, and that 20-year drought, is over. But it is what it is, man. I kind of want to ask you something as well, Tom, as we're kind of on this. If I share my screen with you, I'm sure you've gone over this already, but I thought it's just a bit of fun. For anyone that's just listening, with Arsenal's 2024-25 season now wrapped up, I want to know your player of the season, young player of the season, most improved player, unsung hero, disappointment of the season, performance of the season, and goal of the season, and seasonal rating. Let's start with seasonal ratings.
Probably a 5 or a 6. I'm really harsh on it, like, because I think it's the injuries are out of our control in terms of like what happened to those players, how long they were out for, whatever. But what was in our control was the chance of those injuries happening, and I think we really let ourselves down in that regard. So yeah, reaching 2 cup semi-finals, including a Champions League, pushes me more towards the 6. But we weren't going to win those competitions because of what we'd done to ourselves as well. So I think Arteta got the most out of what he could this season. I genuinely don't think any other coach in this season for Arsenal gets us more than what we had based upon the resources available to him, the players that he had at different points. I struggle to see how that happens. So I'm very impressed by what he did, but yeah, I can't go more than a 5 or a 6 really.
Yeah, I think a 5 all in all for me as well. I like you said, 2 semi-finals. We did finish second. Obviously, it probably was the worst of the 3 second place finishes. I do have a lot of respect for, well, everybody at the club, but the players, whether I necessarily think they're good enough or not. I think every player stood up to be counted. I think players rushed back to fitness. Players played with injuries. I just got nothing but respect, even down to a young Miles Lewis-Skelly. Arteta, you had to pivot. You had to kind of do what you could. Yeah, I give it a 5, 2 semis, but I do think it kind of what you're saying. And I think every conversation, based on what you said earlier, I find myself coming back to that in that the summer. I know I'm being a bit naive, but I look at Manchester United when we went out the FA Cup and Liverpool when we went out the FA Cup, 2 very different games. But fundamentally, it came down to how do we convert the XG and all of that kind of stuff. We're just putting the ball in the back of the net and going through to the next round. And I feel a lot of our times where we drop points this season, mainly the 4 losses, our players looked a bit out of steam, like they were coming into these games off the back of, intense games already. So, yeah, it is what it is. It's just a case of what if. I think this is a good team, a effing good team, if I'm honest with you. With just a couple of adjustments, we're gone. But, yeah, you've gone with a 6. I've gone with a 5. I think it can't be any higher than that because we didn't do anything. This is interesting. Goal of the season. I think I know it anyways.
It's got to be one of the 2 Declan Rice free kicks. Like it just is. The other one that stands out for me is Lewis-Skelly against Man City. Yeah, that was amazing. And even when Aries goal against Man City as well was brilliant. But the second free kick from Declan Rice, I just love a goal that goes in like the postage stamp in the top right-hand corner. I just like Marmoush's goal. I think rightfully has been picked up there as the goal of the season for Man City and for the Premier League in general. I just think those goals are so extraordinary. The fact that he'd done it once already and he was like, stuff it, I'm going to do it again. It was brilliant.
Fairy tale.
Yeah, I think in that moment, that was the happiest moment of my season, was that goal, the emotions of that goal. So, yeah, for me, it's Rice, second free kick against Madrid.
You said it second. I misheard. I thought I was going to ask you the first or the second. Admittedly, I don't know between the first or the second because the first.
I get why people like the first. It's great.
But then, like you kind of said, the second is like, F it, I'm going to do it again. And like, from you've done it again, you know how football fans are. They'll say the first one, it's a fluke. And Declan's done it twice. So I'd give it to him. Like you said there, the Lewis-Skelly moment with everything going into the City game. Not really underrated, but I guess that it wasn't a game of quite magnitude like these lot. I'm sure Saka scored a very good goal against Liverpool. Obviously, it's a top 6 game, but I'm sure he scored a very good goal at the Emirates. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, I mean, you can't look beyond Declan Rice's one of the 2 against Real Madrid. Performance of the season, then.
Performance of the season. I mean, it's difficult to not look past that Declan Rice performance in general. Anyway, like that was unbelievable. Just the 2 free kicks in the second leg. He was also absolutely fantastic in that game. I'm really struggling to think of any other player that really stood out for me in an individual game more than that. Gabriel at Spurs was also very good. So he scored the goal, was the winning goal, but outside of that was excellent defensively. My player of the season, I haven't even mentioned it. I'm trying to think of any specific performances from them stood out, but I think they would. I'm not trying not to give it away, but they were just kind of really good across the whole season.
David Raya, Man United.
Yeah, that was a hell of a goalkeeper.
Got us out of jail.
Yeah, he really did. And David Raya is another one who deserves a lot of credit. Isn't my player of the season, but definitely was in the mix for that. But I'll have to go with Rice in first against Madrid. I can't think of another player who I think individually in a game had a better performance than him. So yeah,
I'm with you with that. I mean, Rice is cleaning up the awards. You can't look beyond it. Like, you genuinely can't. Of course, in the Madrid games there was other good performers, but I just think it capped off the second half of the season. And I wouldn't say Declan Rice was poor in the first half of the season, but I'd give it like a 5 or a 6 for him. Second half of the season, it felt like he's dropping 9s and 10s week in, week out, and he's just really coming into his own. So yeah, performance of the season, I'm going Rice in the first leg against Madrid, or the second, but it's just Declan Rice against Madrid. Take your pick. Disappointment of the season.
I don't think you can go for someone like Sterling because I didn't expect
the bars on the floor.
Him. Yeah, the bar was so low. You could go for someone like Calafiori because, like, you know, they've come in big price and it just hasn't been fit. Like, that's really disappointing, of course. But for me, it's Martin Odegaard because Martin Odegaard is my favourite player, and you know, fans say I'm biased with him all the time. But
join the club.
You know, yeah, he's on the back of this shirt that I'm wearing. Like, he's just, for me, he is a world-class player. And that's why in the last 2 seasons, he won player of the season, because of his contributions in those seasons and his ability on the ball, the way in which he uses it, how creative he can be. He was just the biggest disappointment. And I think he would admit that himself. I think he's humble enough to say that. I think he had spoken about that in an interview, that he's not been good enough. Yeah, I think that's absolutely where I'm at with Odegaard, is that I think this was an off-season affected by injury that, had we had more depth, he would have been able to have more rest, more time away from the spotlight, better chance to reset. And he's just had to grind through really bad form without much respite. And that's affected his campaign. I think some of the discussion around him has been utterly ridiculous, like talk of stripping the captaincy and all that. I mean, talk about sticking by your players when they're facing adversity or whatever, especially when they've given you already so much. But yeah, for me, Odegaard is that player, definitely.
And the saddest thing is, yeah, I hear the legit points about Odegaard's captain's armband, if you want Magalhaes to have it or Rice to have it. Yeah. But reality is, people don't care as much as they say. If the guy was playing out of his skin, there'd be maybe little murmurings, but nobody cares. Like, if he just starts playing well, no one cares. And like you said, we've got to stick by our players. I must admit, bro, I'm going with Odegaard as well, because ultimately he set high standards. He's great off the ball in what he gives the system. He's great when he's on song. I do think towards the end of the season, I know people will sit here and say, oh, it's all gone and it's all lost anyways, but he is coming back into form. And kind of what I was saying earlier, Tom, he's another one as to, of course, if you're not playing good, you have to hold the criticism. But I kind of feel sorry for the players, because there's been no hiding place. You cannot take him out of the firing line. I reckon the players with Odegaard, I reckon Arteta's just asked him, like, can you do me a favor? Like, I know I should take you out of the side. I know that there's other things going on, but please just do me a favor. And I think he has. I don't want to speculate, but I just think he needs some time off. He's not, I don't think he looks good off the ball. Like, he's not running the way he is and stuff like that. But I think he'll be back next season. Do you think
little things at the end of the season? Sorry, you know, like the shot against Liverpool that led to Marino's goal, his goal against Southampton, like they're good signs, I think, for what's to come.
Exactly, like they're good signs for what's to come. It looks like, again, I'm not a physio, but it looks like he's getting strength back into his ankle. He's looking like he's hitting shots with venom. Do you think, with Odegaard, I know we've got the very young and talented Max Dowman coming through, and we've got Wanyeri, who's probably seen as some sort of backup for Saka at the moment, but can play in midfield. And there's probably, you know, transfer discussions at Arsenal, or at least with Arsenal fans. We're talking about strikers and left wingers and probably even goalies. Do you think there's scope for another like 8.5, 10 guy that can compete with Odegaard or deputize or share the burden or whatever? Like, do you think that's something we could or probably should address?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. I want to be aware that you got Winera, you've got Max Dowman as well coming through, but I'd love to see Eberezer come to Arsenal. I think he's the perfect candidate for Arsenal to go for. Some people highlight his age, being mid to late 20s now, but we're going for a title. Like, you need players that can come in and make an immediate impact. And at 26, he'll be 27 in June. Like, he's just won. He's dragged Palace to I know there's other players that had big performances as well. Yes, but it's his goals, it's his influence, it's his talismanic nature that has taken Palace to that FA Cup. And I think he would be great in this Arsenal team in a number of positions, not just in left 8 or attacking midfield or on the left wing. I think he could play in multiple roles.
Do you think we'd go for him though? Because he's a player I like as well. But then you see 60 odd million. I don't know how much it costs to get Nico Williams and Šeško in this one and that one. But do you think, obviously you're not an ITK, but like, do you think there's like, do you think?
Oh no, there is interest. Arsenal have interest in him. They've been watching him for a long while. Obviously,
getting excited, man.
For Arsenal, yeah. He obviously came through Arsenal at a young age, left at a young age. But yeah, no, there's interest there. But I don't know is the answer about whether or not that interest will be formalised into a move. Certainly, I know Arteta appreciates him, but I think that there are other areas that they're looking at as higher priorities at the moment. And if maybe those deals can get done and there's still an opportunity there, he has a release clause in his contract, I believe, as well, but it is quite expensive. So Palace, I think, will sit on that and be like, if you want him, you've got to come and get him for that price. So, yeah.
Especially after you just, gone down in folklore at Crystal Palace, on top of just being a great player, you've just won them an FA Cup. Who's your unsung hero? This is where it probably gets a bit interesting.
Unsung hero. I feel like my player of the season was being talked about a lot, and there's a lot less recently. But I'll still continue to save him, I think, because he could be. But I think a lot of people might say David Raya for this position, maybe as unsung hero. I'm going to go Mikel Merino, I think.
That's mine.
I think I'm going to go Mikel Merino just because, there were no expectations when he moved into that centre-forward role. Him scoring at Leicester, those two headed, the first header and then obviously the finish, was just brilliant. Asking him about being a striker and all that stuff. But then he started to play there and it was like, oh, his goal record's insane.
You actually look quite good there. You look better there than
this guy was playing for Barca, with this, or not even Barca, but somebody else like Monaco or something, putting in this record goals. Would be like, oh, we should be looking at signing this guy this summer. The record was silly because people look at goals as the only metric these days, it seems. But so I think it has to be here. I think it has to be Mikel. And we went to the Bernabeu with Mikel Merino as our striker and won. That is
football doesn't make sense sometimes.
No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't.
I'm with you with that. I don't think you can look beyond Mikel Merino, and I think it's more than anything for him. I've always I guess I'm getting that. Yeah, people can have opinions on footballers. You cannot like this one, like that one, praise one week, critique the other. But I feel with Merino there was just too much agendas. I think when he signed for us, he was going to be the best thing since sliced bread, courtesy of everyone before he's kicked the ball. Bearing in mind he was an Arsenal fan. As you said earlier, he had an injury. I do feel he looks like a bit like one of those confidence players. He gave an interview and he was like, please don't go too hard on me. My English isn't well. And I was thinking, your English is brilliant. You need a bit more self-belief. And I think he just needed a bit of confidence. So I'm happy for him playing up front. You mentioned Madrid, you mentioned Leicester. There was a couple of moments. I'm sure you scored against Liverpool at the Emirates, and I'm sure you scored against Chelsea. So he's done well. Some are even saying he's a better option than Kai Havertz, in which I'm all for that debate. But Arsenal, can we go and get a cold-hearted killer up front and then have that debate for next season? So I don't disagree. I think Merino's unsung hero. Most improved player.
Most improved player. I think that this is where you can talk about players like Miles Lewis Skelly, because obviously, and spoiler, he is the young player of the season. There's not really a debate.
Yeah.
But when you look at from what he's joined in the team and where he is now, I don't think there is a player that's taken more of a step than him from kind of the entrance into the team. Like, there was raw natures about him when he first came. I remember that game where he came on instead of Zinchenko against Liverpool. Like, he was at fault for the goal that we conceded. He was too aggressive in how he pushed up, and we got exposed in behind. And, he was at part of fault for that. I remember the game against PSV where he should have been sent off, like, for that second half of being on yellow card. Like, it's not been a flawless season from him by any means, but he is the one that has taken the biggest leap forward in terms of quality. He's considered an England senior international in back-to-back selections by Thomas Tuchel now, 18 years of age. He faced incredible adversity, I think, this season from outside factors, media side of things, the whole Erling Haaland characterization, the racism that he's experienced this season. Certainly, I think that Mars Lewis-Skelly is a brilliant footballer and person. He's got amazing people around him. Of course, I've personally, spent an afternoon listening to one of his mum Marsha's kind of sessions with young parents, looking at kind of how you deal with a youngster being in an academy and coming through, and what advice you need and what to look out for. Like, he couldn't have better advice around him. And the fact that people have taken this season and some of his like cheekiness, which we dream of having these days, football can be so boring, and we need characters and we need personalities. And the fact that he was, Haaland, that arc from him coming on at Man City and Haaland saying to, "Who the F are you?" And that's
what people forget as well. Haaland started it. Not that I care necessarily.
Exactly.
I think it's needed in football, but
exactly. Like, it's just great, and like, people want to just douse that fire immediately. It's such a shame. And I think he is the young player of the season, and he is the most improved because he has taken from where he joined when he first broke into that first team to where we are now. It's a massive leap.
I mean, I don't think anyone can disagree. Well, if they disagree with that, Tom, then they just simply don't like Mars Lewis-Skelly. That is out of all the content creators and people I've had on the platform, that is the most compelling case somebody has put forward for most improved player. In which my most improved player, which I think you're right, based on what you said, it definitely is Mars Lewis-Skelly. But I'm going to go with Kiwior purely because I don't think Kiwior was a bad player. But he's someone I was like, I'm not really convinced on you. And I think you've stepped up very well. You look very comfortable in your own position. And I've got a newfound respect for the Polish Maldini. I must admit, you're better than what I thought. Like, I have to go Kiwior, but I'm going to give it Lewis-Skelly, man. You put it.
He could have been unsung here as well, I think, Kiwior.
True.
I think Kiwior really has been, in the last 3 months since Gabriel's injury, what a level of performance. I don't know if it's a case of like most improved, because we never saw him at left centre half. He always played out of position. He always played left back or right centre half. And, this is his position. Left centre half is his position. Maybe this is just how good he is when you play him in his role.
That's true. That's true.
And we just haven't used him there, because Gabriel's always been there. So I absolutely want to see him stay next season. I think he's a great depth option for us there. I think he should get more game time. I think we should be bringing Gabriel off earlier in games that we've got a lead in. We can bring Kiwior on, or tactically bringing him on, or rotating him for Champions League phase games and cup games and certain league fixtures as well. I really think we should be using more of Kiwior next season.
I think you're right. Do you think he will stay? I only ask you that because there's probably a number of players that need to go through the door before Kiwior. And I know it's all fun and games. If you was to ask most fans who they be open to selling, with just saying random names, they might say, I've had enough with Tomiyasu with injuries. I'm not really convinced on Kai. I think Zini needs to go. Reece Nelson and Fabio Vieira here. It's all fun and games saying that, but for a variety of factors, it's not for, and we hope Berta can, but it's not for sure that they're going to go or there's going to be a market for them. Where I look at Kiwior, there's always been rumblings with Italian teams, and you could argue maybe with Kiwior, he thinks, do you know what, I could get more football here. Or he thinks, do you know what, I actually remember how good I am. I want to play a lot of football, and maybe the Italian clubs are going to go for him. And maybe potentially, in terms of bringing some money in, potentially he's someone who stocks the highest and could command the highest coin. Like, do you think Kiwior's future is one to watch, or?
Yeah, it's definitely one to watch. There's an interest from him in Italy and Germany in particular that I'm aware of, and that extends from last summer. But his value has risen a lot in the second half of this season. And if Arsenal sell him, it'll be because they get an offer that they deem is fair. And I think upwards of £30 million is what it would take to, I think, land Kiwior now. Willie, I think it's 50-50. I think as
exactly.
And I know that's a cop-out answer, but I do think it's 50-50. I think if Arsenal get a good offer for him, it's very hard to turn that down for a player who isn't a guaranteed starter when everyone's fit, which they can reinvest elsewhere. And you've got another young defender in Marley Salmon, of course, coming up through the ranks. They really appreciate as well. So I think he'll stay. If I was betting on it, if I had to pick a side, I'd lean more on him staying. But in the transfer market, someone can pop up with a bid that just, makes you think, wow, yeah, we should probably, consider moving him on if we can get that amount of money for him now. Because next season, if Gabriel comes back fit, is Kiwior going to play enough to maintain that value that he has right now? Probably not. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Does next season worry you as well on the topic of that? Because it depends. Well, for me as a casual viewer, I know nobody really knows, but everywhere I read, some seem a bit more bullish on Gabriel Magalhaes returning than others. So if I assume Magalhaes will be back for the start of the season, but will he might miss the first 2-3 weeks, maybe Timber the same. Surely it makes sense to hold on to Kiwior then.
Yeah, I think certainly until the end of the window. And if he's going to leave, it would be a late exit. Yeah, I think that's probably a really good point. It is hope that Gabriel will be back for the start of the season. I think that's the feeling. Certainly when you look at the timelines of the other players that are missing, June, July, and then into August, you'd be hoping that he was out for the whole of May as well, wasn't he? So that's 3 months closing on 4. I think you're right. I think that, there is a chance that maybe you need to have that player. I'd be surprised if Gabriel was involved in much of pre-season, if any. So, yeah, it's one to keep an eye on, but I think Kiwior should be kept at the moment. I think we need him.
Do you know what? Yeah, before I ask, obviously, young player and player of the season, I just thought unsung hero. Could you throw Timber in there? I mean, Timber gets his plaudits from everyone, but I don't think me or you have mentioned his name.
Well, I wasn't going to mention his name until player of the season because he's actually my player of the season.
Fair. We could jump ahead then.
Fair. I think Jurriën Timber has been so incredible. For a player that missed all of last season pretty much with an ACL, he's played a stupid amount of games for Arsenal this year. He's closed in on 4,000 minutes across the
Ridiculous.
season. He's not the fullback he's not your Trents or your Jeremy Frimpong type, fullbacks that bomb up the wing and create assists and create goals. He has added goals and added assists to his game to a degree, not loads, but I just think he's been astonishingly consistent. He's probably the most consistent performer across the whole season. Most players went through peaks and troughs.
Yeah.
Rice, it's definitely a lot of people's player of the season, but the beginning of the season was off the pace, had a toe issue, obviously, which affected his form. I think Partey dipped off at certain points, particularly towards the end of the season. So Saliba and Gabriel, you can talk about them. Saliba went up and down. Gabriel had a hell of a season, but obviously missed the last part of the campaign with an injury, which I think has to, in a way, come into kind of concern when you're thinking about the contributions across the whole season. I just think Jurriën Timber's been astonishingly good. I'd personally have put him. We did our European team this season. I put him as the best right back in Europe this season. I think he's been that good. I really think he's just one of those that isn't talked about enough, and needs to be spoken about in such a way. I know Hakimi has been great and scored in a Champions League final. So we did this before the Champions League final, it should be said. But if Hakimi's first, I think Jurriën Timber is a very close second.
I don't think anyone can disagree with you with that. And I just hope we live in a world where Arsenal next season, when we've been talking about our players of the season or most improved, bar Mikel Merino, it's probably, and I'm not disrespecting our players, but it's probably been our defensive players we've kind of harped on about. I want to bring the attacking players into the mix. I can't disagree with what you said about Timber, and it's nice that we can actually have a discussion as to the multiple players who could get it. Even Raya arguably could be there, but it wouldn't be it for me. I'd still have Magalhaes, man. I just think Magalhaes I know he's been injured, but I just feel he's been different gravy. I think more than anything, I mean, he's always been a leader, but I think he's really stepped up with his leadership qualities. I must admit, when he got injured, I was fearing the worst, and it's a bit scary how we put in that level of performance against Real Madrid without him, but I can't disagree with Timber. As you said, 4,000 minutes. I honestly, I don't think Timber will be upset that he's played that much, but I genuinely think if you were to talk to the physios, Mikel Arteta and Timber, they would genuinely say, yeah, we didn't expect I'd be playing that much, which kind of goes back to, what I said earlier about how my heart bleeds for the players that there's no Silverware, because they've really ran themselves into the ground and showed commitment and gone against the grain. When people sit there and say, "Oh, footballers don't care," it doesn't mean anything to them. I think when you look away from that, it's quite evident that the opposite's true. But yeah, man. It's just a shame that it's, in fact, I would say overall disappointment of the season would be that it's another year with no silverware. But what are you going to do, Tom? I do need to ask you certain things, man. I mean, you're not a fortune teller, but does this statistic give you any optimism? The only time Arsenal have ever finished second in 3 consecutive seasons, they went on to win the league in the following year. Any optimism, positive omen?
I'm not really a superstitious person, so I don't know. I think that's just, we can take it and use that. I think if Arsenal are second next season and not winning a trophy, it's going to be a very difficult place to be as Arsenal, and we're interested to see what happens to get to that point if that's what happens. But especially after what we're hoping is going to be a good summer as well. But I hope so. I sincerely hope so, because Arsenal, I think this team needs a title. It needs either the Premier League or the Champions League. It's something that is absolutely needed to legitimize and vindicate a lot of the work and investment that's gone on over the last 5 years.
Facts, man. Do you feel, throughout, like, I know people say Arteta's been there 5-6 years and we've spent all of this and that and all of that, and I'm not saying that's right, that's all wrong. For me, I look at the last 3 years, or you could say four going into the season, well, next year, 2025, 26. But I say, what year was it? 2022, 23 to this point. That's where if fans are serious, that's where we really started getting involved in these conversations and whatnot. Do you feel like within this period, I know the goalposts will move with most fans, but if we picked up a couple more like FA Cups or a League Cup, do you think there'd still be pressure, obviously with the champs and the Prems, but do you think there'd be it'd be a lot more rosier?
100%. Yeah, no, without question. If Arsenal had picked up a League Cup and an FA Cup in this run, I don't think there's any doubt that we would be feeling much more confident around where this Arsenal team are and what we're achieving and where we're going. And there wouldn't be this thing about Arteta can't get it over the line, because obviously he would have lifted multiple trophies after the FA Cup in 2021. So it's hard for me. I'm looking at Jurgen Klopp, for example. He took over at Liverpool in 2015. He won his first title in 2020. He won the Champions League in the year before that, in 2019. So from taking over in 2015, 4 years to win the Champions League, 5 years to win the title. Obviously, he took over a team that had a lot more resources and already had been competing for the title under Brendan Rodgers, of course, prior to his arrival, which Arteta didn't have when he arrived, and had to rip up the entire squad pretty much with very few sellable assets, unlike Liverpool with Coutinho, etc. So I think that Arsenal are on track, but obviously he picked up. I mean, he won his first FA Cup in 2022, League Cup. His first League Cup was in 2022 as well. So even before Klopp won his first title in 2020, he hadn't picked up an FA Cup or a League Cup in that time, which is quite an interesting thing to think about. But he had reached the Champions League final in 2017-18, which I think gave him a lot of, in the same way that the FA Cup in Arteta's first season gave him credibility at the beginning. That gave him that kind of, they're going to go on to surely get something over the line, if that makes sense. And they did that in 2018-19.
Do you think next season? Sorry to cut you, but do you think next season there's proper pressure on Mikel Arteta?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. There's pressure on him. Yeah, because if he doesn't lift the trophy next season, whatever trophy, I think if he was to say lift the League Cup, I don't think that would, really in the same way that it would have maybe 2-3 years ago, relieve the pressure. It's all about the Premier League and the Champions League. That is what the club is about. Internally, that the view is, yes, we need to go as far as we can in those cups, like the FA Cup and the League Cup, but they know that the Premier League title and the Champions League are the two that they need to be lifting. I've always said that I think Arteta has to show in this contract that he can win one of those two titles to earn the next one. That's always the view I've held. And if he doesn't do that in the upcoming season or the next season, then it's very hard not to give credence to the conversation. Unfortunately, a lot of Arteta's critics have kind of destroyed the genuine debate around Arteta's future, because you could have a genuine conversation about whether Arteta is the right man to be in charge of Arsenal that there isn't a middle ground, unfortunately. That whole debate has been destroyed by aspects of the Arsenal fan base just for clicks and attention and views and whatever.
Facts.
So, which is a shame, because I think the Arteta debate after next season, if we don't win anything, is a genuinely interesting one. But unfortunately, people just kind of pigeonhole you into kind of these different camps. And
are you in? Are you out?
Exactly. And it's just not the way football works. So binary, way people look at football so binary is just so annoying, because it's just like, so trophy equals success. Everything else is failure. You know, Gyökeres scores 50 goals. Must be a great striker. Šeško has 13 league goals a season. Must be a terrible signing. Like, it's this way that people look at football in just one way.
The same people waffling about Gyökeres in Portugal. We look down on the league generally and say it's a farmers league. The players ain't good enough.
Yeah, people are weird.
It's funny, man. what are you gonna do, man? Even with that, like, my personal thing with Arteta is, it's hard not to like him. Like, you're in the press boxes, so you see the passion he is. Anyone that goes to the games, you can see it, whether you even watch it on TV. Isolated away from Arsenal, I admire him, because you've been a manager really and truly for about 30 seconds, and you've got to the latter stages of the Champions League since you've been back there. There's a lot of good things. No man in this world is without fault, so you do have things you need to improve. I think this season is the most where I'm unhappy with you tactically, because I know you've pivoted and showed adversity, but I look in the last 2 years, I've seen us great or stand out in Europe defensively and for our attacking football. I think we've kind of regressed a bit or stagnated a bit, Arteta, and I think you're better than that. Where the issues now comes is, that's me looking at Arteta in isolation. When I marry it with Arsenal and, you know, the drought we've been on, and because the fact is, I think we've actually been quite good. I think now we're in a stage where it's actually legitimate, definitely in the Premier League, to say why we're not getting over the line. And that's the final stepping stone for me with Arteta. You're a good coach. Are you a winning coach? Yes, you've won an FA Cup or 2 Community Shields as well. Can you get us over the line? And I do think that's a genuine conversation. Like, because I hold you to these high standards, I think you can get over the line. But as you said, there's too much agenda-driven drivel, if I'm completely honest. So we're never going to be in a space where we legitimately ask this. Now, whether the club are looking at it like that, I don't know, because obviously, God forbid, if Arteta got sacked today, who are they going to get? Is that they're kind of thinking, or are they comfortable persisting with Arteta trying to polish this rough diamond that he is? Honestly, I have no clue. I do need to ask you as well, then how do you make the Berta Arteta dynamics at play? Because some would say, you know what, Berta's been there to find his replacement. Like, what do you think of it? Like, how does it work for you?
Berta's come in to try and do what Edu couldn't, and that's to basically put Arteta into a position where we don't look at anything else but him. You know, I want Arsenal to be in a position in the start of this season where there are no external caveats to Arteta's season, where at the end of the campaign, we can look at it and go, the only reason that we didn't achieve what we set out to achieve is the manager. That I want to be in a position where we can have that conversation.
That's fair.
If we get there. You know, I don't want, like, this season, you cannot have that conversation because of the fact he wasn't backed, wasn't supported in the window, because of the injury he suffered, the refereeing decisions to an extent. I mean, they're just kind of a constant. So I expect those to happen, and that will screw us over at some point during next season, I'm sure. But I just want Arsenal to be in a position where he has the team, we sign the players we know we need, and we get to see if he can take Arsenal to those titles that we know that we've been so close to. Because I think he can. I think he can take us there. You look at the season before the one just gone, winning more games in the Premier League than the Invincibles did, scoring more goals in the league than the Invincibles did, finishing 2 points off the title. That showed, that team, that season showed that Arsenal were absolutely capable of winning a title with this manager, with these players. And I just think we're just so close. And I just hope we can get there.
I think you're right, man. We are close. And I just think for everyone in the summer, I think for the players, you need to go and review where you need to get better. For Arteta, I need you to find that balance of being stubborn in your own principles, but evolving. I guess he's evolved. And I think this season, so it will probably be one that sticks out in his mind for a long time, because I think he would have learned a lot with the Champions League and whatnot. But I need him to evolve. Like, for me, I mean, we're gonna, as we close up, we're gonna get into it, but I don't think it's as white and black as you sign Rodrygo, Gyökeres, Šeško, whichever one in our attack, and we're flying. Clearly, it makes a difference, but people are crying about our chance creation and whatnot. If the core principles stay the same and you sign these players and nothing really changes, where you're going to be at then? So even down to the physios. Now, I'm not criticizing the physios, but something's gone on there. Naturally, we've had an unreal amount of injuries for a variety of factors. My point being, It's just a case of everybody just needs to go back to the drawing board. You know, there's been some highs previous years. Last year was a downer. Let's just take all of that and use that as a bit of fuel. Do you think Arteta, like, not setting himself up, but kind of on the theme of getting it over the line and whatnot? He's gone, for what I've seen anyways, he's being less diplomatic where he talks about transfers. He's not specifically saying we're going to do X, Y, Z, but I mean, you're in the press boxes. He's being very kind of direct of we need this, we need that, and the third.
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's a bit sick and tired of kind of like the stigma that he's not that way, that he's that he's at fault for like not having the squad that we think we should have right now. That the fact that we haven't, I think he's so sick of the idea of that he doesn't want a centre forward and that he wants this. Like, the words he's been using recently, like the one after the Newcastle home game was the biggest one, I think, where he said, "I'm going to insist on it." Like that was a really big statement. And I welcome that. Absolutely. I think I want to see more of that from him. He had a bit of a back and forth with James Ollie when talking about kind of the idea of signing a player, and he was like, "Do I need to be clear? Like the statement is the same from January."
It was snappy.
And I like that. I think that's good. You know, I want him to be that way inclined. You know, he's done that with me. You know, in the past. You know, I've gone back at him about certain questions later on. He kind of bit back when I was talking about Man United reaching, you know, 5 finals. Is it 5 finals, something like that?
5 finals in 6 years or something.
5 finals in 6 years. He was like, and I said about, is that people measuring that as success? And what's fair? And he said, success and failure aren't two words in my vocabulary. And a few weeks later, I went back at him about that. And I said, you said that success and failure isn't in your vocabulary. You know, do you feel that people looking at football in such a binary way is a worry? And he was like, yeah, I think it is, you know, and I think that he went and explained kind of further on that point. But yeah, I do really think that he's taken no prisoners, I think, this summer. And certainly I think if we get to the end of the window and we haven't landed the players that we know that we need, I don't think that's on him. And if anything, I'd be starting to worry about whether he thinks he's in the right place to achieve what he wants to achieve as a manager as well. So that becomes a concern in itself.
I'm quite bullish about the summer because naturally I tried, a bit like Arteta, I tried to be optimistic. I tried to be quite philosophical in how I look at things. I'm of the thing of, I don't want to forget last season. I don't want to look at it positively or negatively. I just genuinely want to look at it and take the good and make it great and take the obvious areas of improvement and keep it moving in that kind of regard. But then I look at it and I ask myself, like, am I putting too much faith in Berta? Like, for me, I'm not disrespecting Berta. It's just, I like what you did at Atletico Madrid. With the greatest of respect to Edu, it looks like you're several calibers above. Like, and I look at it, as much as he's good, can he really perform miracles, really? Because if it's an underwhelming summer again, people are going to kind of look at Berta. So am I putting too much eggs in the Berta basket without knowing anything, really?
No, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of expectation. I've said this before. I don't think it's a free hit summer. I think you're coming in as an experienced sporting director.
Exactly.
And it's not like Edu, where he was learning to a degree on the job. You know the job. You know that you've got the contacts. You've done the deals. You've brought in some of the biggest players on earth. You've spent some of the biggest funds ever seen on individual players. I think it was Raul Felix, Atletico Madrid. You've done some of the biggest sales, as we've seen as well, Antoine Griezmann. He's experienced in some of the biggest deals that we've ever seen. So there's no build up, there's no warm up, there's just now, and he has to go and secure Arsenal the bag effectively and get them the players they need.
Simple as that, really and truly. And that's one thing I like what I'm seeing as well, based on reports, in that it feels like we've never had an ability to pivot. Now, obviously, you could caveat that with, you know, we wanted the Garcia lad from Espanyol, whether people like it or not. We got Neto. I mean, we was offered Sterling. Feels like that's been the theme, actually. Offered Ollie Watkins and offered Sterling. We did that. Based on what I'm seeing with Berta now, it's like we're tying up kind of several deals, and then we'll pull one trigger when we've reached a consensus or be able to pivot. So it'd be interesting. I mean, when you see the whole 200 million with no PSR issues and whatnot, I'm not saying the club's going to spend recklessly, but it's required. Do you buy any of the rumors with Partey going to Barcelona? And where are you at with the new deal for Thomas as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's realism in that, because he's out of contract in the summer. So clubs are going to be, you know, having conversations with representatives. There's going to be inquiries made. There's going to be offers. There's going to be discussions around what Partey is looking for. I think that Partey, his preference would be to remain at Arsenal, certainly for next season, but is going to want guarantees and he's only had the same contract for the last 5 years. This would be his first renewal if he has one. So, the terms would be discussed as well. There'd be expectation, I think, over those. Whereas other players, of course, have had renewals every couple of years and gone up as a result of that as well. And I think, that's something to consider. I think that there are issues. I think that the injury side of things is something to be concerned about. This was an anomaly when it comes to a season for Partey with injuries. Pretty much every year we've had him, there's been problems, and he's a big earner. And the thing for Arsenal and Arteta is Arteta's been very outspoken. He said he wants to keep him, and if that's what the manager wants, if you fail to secure the player that the manager wants to keep, then does that look bad on the club potentially? It's a multifaceted issue. I think that from an Arsenal side of things, as I said, they want to keep him. If they don't keep him, then that will be seen as not achieving what they set out, or at least what the manager wanted to set out to do anyway.
Obviously, you're not the coach, but if Zubimendi comes in, who do you reckon's first choice? Do you think we see Rice continue in the 8 with Zubimendi, or what we see at the moment?
It's similar to the striker scenario of Havertz, isn't it? Because whoever we sign at centre forward, to me, the ones that we're talking about, Gyökeres and Šeško, for me, they're not significant upgrades on Kai Havertz at centre forwards. They're not like it's not like an Isak son who comes in, bang, you've got your guy. Either of those two I think, will be better in the long term over Havertz. I think Havertz gets a very rough ride from our supporters. This is the guy.
It's not going to stop, Tom.
I know it's not going to stop, and you're going to get comments. Just me saying that will spark a response. But I think that similarly to that, Zubimendi will become the 6, and Šeško or Gyökeres will become the 9. But there's a chance if Partey stays that he does start out as our starting number 6, and gradually the season evolves and the squad evolves and the team changes. So, yeah.
I remember when me and you did a video a few years ago. I think the summer we signed Rice, Havertz, and all of them. I actually wanted Lavia. Now I'm not saying we should go back in for Lavia as good as he is, but I felt that was the Partey replacement before he needed replacing. So that when you said that, that's what brought me back to that. The one thing I would say with Thomas is, like you mentioned, this season's been an anomaly. I thought back to the 2022-23 season where it was him and Granit. I think Partey's one of, every player, so I wouldn't call him weird, but he's one of those weird players that kind of needs to build up form and momentum and all those kind of things. I don't think he looks the same when he comes in and out of a team. So I don't know how it would pan out. I think we need to keep Partey. I think we need to keep the experience. I hope the Zubimendi thing goes through if it hasn't already, because midfield's a big area, and let's just keep it moving in that regard. So yeah, we've touched on Zubimendi, Šeško. It looks like that's going through. Who would you actually want out of Gyökeres and Šeško? Because I must admit, and it's quite annoying as football fans. Of course, Šeško might not be the guy. And I understand with the crazy statistics you're seeing with Gyökeres and the frustration about, the fact that Gyökeres is 26. We're trying to deliver now. It does feel like with our club, it's always about tomorrow. But people are talking about Šeško, in my opinion, and I know he's raw and he probably starts a second choice. But for me, fair enough, you can be disappointed about Gyökeres. But people are behaving like Šeško is just some random lad in the pub that's just now going to play up front. The guy can be very good if we polish him. But where are you at with it? Because both are risks. That's what people forget. Both are risks. You can spend all the money with Gyökeres and he still doesn't do the job. But where are you at with that?
Yeah, I lean slightly towards Šeško. I think Šeško is probably the smarter acquisition, the smarter investment of the two. I think that I think Gyökeres is the riskier addition out of the two. I think there is so many more question marks about Gyökeres and whether or not what he's doing can translate to Arsenal, because he's in a perfect situation for a centre forward. He plays in a league that has a lot of drawbacks in comparison to where he would be joining. He went from the Championship from scoring 22 goals to the Portuguese league for the team that, the most dominant team in that league, being
the bullies of the league, really.
And is, he immediately saw an improvement in his numbers, immediately, but not by loads. I think he finished the season with Coventry with 21 goals, I think it was, or 22 goals. I'm just going to double check those numbers. And when he moved in his first season to Sporting, I think he scored 29 league goals in his first season. Yeah, so he scored 21 for Coventry in 22-23, moved to Portugal, scored 8 more in the Portuguese league. Now, I think there are a lot of teams in the Championship that are better than a lot of the teams in the Portuguese league, personally.
Some of the defenders are scary in the Portuguese league. Some of his goals.
Certainly. And then obviously this season he's got 39 league goals in 33 games again for Sporting. So an improvement of 10 into his next season. So he's maintained that form. But people will quickly point out that a lot of those goals are penalties as well. So for Coventry, he scored 18 non-penalty goals in his last season. In his first season with Sporting, he scored 24 non-penalty goals. And then last season, even though he scored 10 more goals overall, he only scored 3 more non-penalty goals than he did the season before that, so 27. And then you start looking kind of at the finishing side. So I prefer to kind of look at, when you're looking at bringing in a centre forward, if they're bringing in decent numbers anyway, have a look at how they're outperforming their non-penalty XG, because that gives you a really good indication about their finishing ability, because they're going to get very similar chances playing for Arsenal. Whoever joins, it's not going to be that different. Yes, there's different movement and different abilities, but I think Šeško ironically suits Arsenal's system more than
presses well, drops deep. He's the prototype for an
aerially. He's much more dominant,
beast in the air as well.
Gyökeres, I think, has scored 4 headers in his 95 goals for Sporting. He's not aerially dominant like Šeško is. But yeah, looking at the numbers here, so 21.4 was the non-penalty XG. He scored 27 goals, so that is 5.6 when it comes to kind of outperforming his non-penalty XG. The season before that, his non-penalty XG was 18.7, and he scored 24, so 5.3 there. So very similar. So just around the fives. Šeško, in terms of what his non-penalty XG has been last season, and not the season just gone, the season before that, he had 7.7 non-penalty XG and scored 14 non-penalty goals. So 6.3 in terms of outperformance. This season, it did drop again. Well, not again.
The whole team's been poor, Leipzig, and he's been almost not second fiddle, but at the mercy of some teammates.
That's the other context to this. So it was 8.4 non-penalty XG, scored 11 goals. So if you combine those, you're looking at 25 non-penalty XG across those 2 seasons. Goals that have scored without penalties, so 25, with a non-penalty XG rating of, and it's testing my math skills here, but 16.1. So he's outperformed it by, more than 8 across those 2, whereas Gyökeres is not quite reaching those numbers. It's also good to point out the age difference between the 2, which is around 4 or 5 years. And if you actually look at kind of the player that everyone wants, me included, which is Alexander Isak, when Alexander Isak was performing at the similar rate to Šeško was at Real Sociedad, Šeško's numbers are far more impressive than what Isak's were playing for Sociedad, a team that this season, Leipzig anyway, have not been creative. They rank well inside the bottom half of Bundesliga sides for shot creating.
It's been a poor season for them in all aspects.
All season. So for me, Šeško's the better choice, better investment. I don't think 93 million is quite accurate in terms of what it would cost Arsenal in terms of a transfer fee. I think it will be less than that. And I can see why he looks to be the preference. He's my preference as well.
I'm cool with either one of those, man. Like me and you have been talking about Šeško for years. I'm fully with the propaganda. I understand, if you just watch the highlights for Gyökeres and the frustrations around wanting to deliver now, why you would want someone like that. But there's risks. There's both have risks. Just because even if we went and bought Gyökeres does not mean I would hope he delivers, but it doesn't mean he's necessarily going to deliver, because the same people that are saying, show the ambition, spend all of that money, do this, do that, they're the first to say, oh, how we bought a Portuguese league flop. The same is going to be said for Šeško. I think with Šeško, it's just a case of realizing that potential, man. We just polished that diamond. I think he's got it all. It'd be interesting to see how he rotates in and out with Kai Havertz. It'd be very interesting. And Arsenal have done their due diligence and homework. If we tried to buy Šeško last year and in January, we don't just, I know there's exceptions to the rule, but we're not just going to wake up and a week before we made a bid, decide we want this guy. We've been looking at him for years. So it'd be interesting. I just want to forward in it. We need that front line. I must admit though, with Šeško, I do think it presses home the need of needing somebody on that left-hand side who's going to share a lot of the work rate in terms of goals and assists with Saka, kind of mimicking what Liverpool had when they had Mane, Salah, and what's his name again, Firmino. So it'd be very, very interesting. Last thing on that, before I ask you the last question, before I let you go, bro. Why do you think, well, I remember David Ornstein came out and said, Arsenal were looking at Gyökeres, Andrea Berta's a big fan of his. Yeah. Why do you think, obviously we've never had a conversation with Berta, but why do you think that Berta might have Gyökeres as his guy and Arteta might have Šeško as his guy?
Yeah, I think that a lot's been made of this, like around the whole one's got this guy, one's the other guy. And because that's all we get exposed to really as fans.
Yeah.
You know, David is absolutely accurate in what he's reporting, as you would expect. You know, David's probably, in my opinion, the best when it comes to reporting on transfers. And it's something Arsenal also have had an interest. I mean, if you go back to the summer of last year, I wrote a piece in around March, April time, that it was my understanding that Arsenal were looking at Gyökeres going into that summer of 2024.
Okay.
So Arsenal's interest in Gyökeres long exceeds anywhere mention of Andrea Berta coming to Arsenal. So it's not like he's not been a player that has been on Arsenal's books. Šeško was the player that they landed on as the better market opportunity in 2024. Obviously, it didn't happen because of a number of factors. And that's persisted, and they've been impressed by the way in which he's fought against the adversity of Leipzig's season and still returned very solid numbers across the board, not just goal scoring, but in many other areas as well. And they see him just, signing Gyökeres, as we've mentioned. There's so many different kind of contexts to it. Andrea Berta, I think, has come from the perspective, of course, that he's the player that's scoring the most goals right now. He's coming from a club in Atletico Madrid that has a track record of looking at signing players that tend to have been high scorers elsewhere. João Felix, of course, they signed from the Portuguese league. There is a Portuguese influence with Jorge Mendes as well from Atletico Madrid side. So Berta's always had a very good line into what's going on in Portugal, basically. So he would have been very well aware and across of what Gyökeres is achieving. And as Arteta said, it's Andrea Berta's job to come in, to give his view, tweak plans, change plans, challenge what's happening. And we as Arsenal fans for a long time said that Edu was a bit of a pushover, really, that they aligned too much, that he didn't challenge. He's charismatic, very nice guy. I've got a lot of respect for the work that he did. But there was a lot of discussions around, was he challenging Arteta enough? And now Berta comes in, reports come out that he's like looking at maybe a different type of centre forward. And now it's, they're not aligned. This is a disaster. It's like, make your mind up, people. One moment you want Arteta to be, questioned.
You're so right.
We don't want a yes man coming in. Now we get this guy that's got different ideas, and this is not good. They're not aligned. It's like, people, no matter what happens, there's complaints about what goes on. So yeah, look, I'm not concerned by this in any way, shape, or form.
That's what you want. You want people that shake the table. As long as egos are put before put after the collective. Who cares? You want different perspectives. And one thing I like about Berta is obviously he's immersing himself in Arsenal and whatnot, but he's a new perspective, because we've been led to believe the club's been aligned for Šeško for a minute now. Obviously, if he's throwing a new line of thinking with Gyökeres, that might help us for another target. The only thing I would say with Šeško, I feel sorry for him, is I think most balanced Arsenal fans, going back to what you said about there's little balance when speaking about things, I think most neutral Arsenal fans, or most thinkers, men and women that support our football club, they will give Šeško the time. They understand he's young, you got to adapt, you got to do this, you got to do that. I think where the frustration comes with, and it might filter through into Šeško, is that we're kind of in win now mode. We want to deliver right now kind of thing. And that's probably beyond the obvious why Gyökeres is probably seen to some as the more attractive buy. Finally then, man, is there any scope of us getting this lad Rodrygo, or is it just a dream selling?
Yeah, it's done, mate. I think he's staying. Certainly, all the noise out of Spain is that he wants to stay at Madrid. New manager coming in, Xabi Alonso. It's a new manager to impress, new manager to get an opportunity under. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't think this is ever going to happen.
Nico Williams or Rafael, based on reports, it is. But as long as we get a striker in the left winger and all the other stuff, and we actually can go into the summer feeling like, okay, cool, we've got the depth, we've got the quality. Go and make it happen, lads, and we can celebrate something in May and we can have parades. Who cares, man? But yeah, it is what it is, man. And with that being said, Tom, it's always amazing being here with you. I don't know why, but I just feel better about my football club speaking with you. Nothing's changed. We ain't signed no one. We ain't won a trophy, but I feel a lot better about the team, man. What content you got to come out?
Yeah, well, I'm taking a bit of a break, actually. I'm going to Canada next week for a couple of weeks. First time, thanks, man. It's the first time I'm taking a proper break. But we're going to pre-record a little bit of content to go out while we're away. So we'll have some guests and shows. Obviously, this week, all as usual, the 8 a.m. show, UK time, every single day will be live up until Monday of next week. So, yeah, come join us. Always chat up, rounding up the news. But do make sure you show your support to DG. He's brilliant. The hardest working man on YouTube. So
this guy's far too kind. Far too kind, man. You're far too kind. As the man said himself, check out the title of this video. Go over to Tom's channel. Check out the description. I mean, I'm here. I don't always comment, but it's like, for instance, when was it? Last week. I think last week, Monday, Tuesday, I was in the gym. I'm always listening on at 8 a.m. man. Big fan of how, especially when you get the spreadsheets out, not the spreadsheets, like the kind of presentations. Big fan of you, Tom, man. Big fan of your content. And I like the Odegaard play on words there as well. I should have said that a lot earlier, man. But Tom, it's early. Let me let you get on with your day, man. Safe journeys. Appreciate you. Make sure you're subscribing, liking, commenting, and whatnot, folks. We're out. Tom, peace out, man.
Pleasure.
Safe.